Hello, everybody. I'm here. 1 p.m. Eastern time today. I'm here for now, I hope. I hope I'll be here. I've had a crazy morning. Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. My name is Travis Shaddix. On this channel, we are always looking to find how we know what we know about turfgrass science. It's been a fun journey so far. I've been doing this for a few months now. I really enjoy it. I enjoy knowing that it seems to make a difference with some of you all out there. I get some good emails and good replies and good comments. It seems like, to some degree, at least, there's some positive impact we've been having so far. So I really appreciate everybody who participates and is able to join us live. And if you can't join us live and you're listening later, then thank you to you as well. We have been going over Thatch. I'm trying to just get my wits about me here. Hang on, my morning has been crazy. So we've been going over Thatch. We're going to continue to go over Thatch this week. So what's been going on with me? Whew, sorry, I don't even have my headphones on right. I've been waiting since June 1. I was supposed to have some outdoor work finished. And since then, it hasn't been finished. And today they called me in the morning and said, hey, we're going to come over to your house and hook up this stuff and get it done. I was like, oh, great. So come on by. I wasn't going to delay them. Let's get it done. 6-7 months late, whatever it is. So let's just get it finished. So that's the reason I'm late. And there's still a chance I might not be able to finish. I may have to hit pause real quick and go take care of some stuff and come back. But I'm sure you'll understand if I have to do that. I'll just hit the be right back button. Okay, it's important. I wanted to get on today because there's a couple things I wanted to go over. First, I've been listening to a few of my podcasts trying to figure out like what pieces I can pull out. And I realized I make a lot of mistakes. I say things and I'm not thinking, I mean, I don't realize it when I'm saying it, but I might be saying organic when I'm in inorganic, or I'm speaking and from in my head, I'm saying the right words, but when I listen back to it, I'm like, wait a second, I'm obviously said the wrong word there. So I'm saying all that to say this is that I'm live. There's no script here. Okay. I'm flying by the seat of my pants and there will be mistakes made. So if there's any doubt or question as to what I said or didn't make sense, by all means, reach out to me and ask me a question because I might have just misspoke. On that note, we're going to go over an article today that is a follow-up article from a prior article we did last week about this during an establishing bentgrass green. And during that podcast, I was talking about the model they used as a factorial, and I completely somehow I got confused, and I was talking about factorial and why you would want to use it, and I wasn't describing a factorial. I was describing a Latin square design. Not that probably anybody really cares, but what I was describing, and I was talking about the differences in error term between the rows and the columns and the all these things. The factorial, it has nothing to do with a factorial. I don't know. I was speaking and saying factorial, but I was describing in my head a Latin square design. They didn't use a Latin square design. So I was wrong. I misspoke. The factorial was fine then. It's still fine now. And my description of a factorial on that episode, 2 or 3 episodes ago, was not a description of a factorial. It was a description of a Latin square. So I apologize for that error. Please let me know if you catch any other errors. I don't want to say anything that's incorrect. So that's that. We have a couple videos we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get into the first one. This will be an example of what's referred to as the availability heuristic bias. So we're going to talk about a couple of videos, and as soon as I get them up here, let's go to the first video. This was Scottsdale, Arizona newscast. Let's listen and see what they have to say.
Seeing a lot more homes with artificial grass around the valley. The city of Scottsdale just banned natural grass from all new home builds.
Why do you have to talk like this when you're on the news? Why can't you just speak like a normal human being? I don't know why they have this voice. I mean, you ever notice that? Seriously, just speak in a normal voice. I'm going to get back to the newscast now. Here we go.
and other valley communities could do the same.
Small yards, big yards, even some corner lots. The artificial grass business is on a roll in Arizona as homeowners look for ways to conserve water and protect the environment.
This turf will all drain.
Brian Klein with Paradise Greens and Turf in Scottsdale tells us they're working non-stop, even in the scorching summer heat.
It only makes sense. I mean, we live in the desert. We're constantly in and out of drought conditions, and it just makes sense. I can't see why, any reasonable homeowner, if they could afford it, wouldn't want to participate in a program that saves water and beautifies the neighborhood at the same time.
So that's not actually not an availability heuristic, what he's saying right there. What he's saying right there is what's referred to as the personal incredulity fallacy. And whenever someone says, it just makes sense, or I can't think of a reason why someone wouldn't want to do that, those are telltale verbiages for the personal incredulity fallacy. I just can't think of any reason why this wouldn't work or why anybody wouldn't do it. That's not a good reason to do it. We're going to show examples of that actually in the world of turfgrass. Well, this is turfgrass here. But just because someone can't think of a reason, or just because it makes sense, well, this makes sense to me, so we should do it. Those are all just personal incredulity fallacies that are not. It's a well-known, documented flaw in reasoning. Okay, that's one. We're not going to talk about that today, but that's one in this particular video. It's easy to catch when you hear those words.
And the turf business appears to have been given another boost. The Scottsdale City Council just approved a new landscaping ordinance to protect the city's water resources. Starting next month, natural grass will no longer be allowed in the front yards of new homes under construction.
This is really about getting rid of non-functional grass. The grass that we don't walk on, the grass that we just use for aesthetics. This is about getting rid of that and only using the functional grass that is necessary for our city.
A number of valley cities currently offer financial incentives to homeowners to remove natural grass and create a zero landscape. But Scottsdale is the first in the Phoenix metro area to ban grass from new home construction. Las Vegas currently has a ban on natural grass for new homes and some commercial development. Klein thinks it's just a matter of time before other Arizona cities do the same.
Typically speaking, with the average residential install, the homeowner will recoup their costs in about 3.5 to 4 years. And that's going to come in savings in water that they're not using to water the grass, and savings in the landscape maintenance they're no longer paying for.
I'm told the cost to install artificial grass can run between $6 and $8 a square foot, with the price depending on the quality of the product and where it's made. For more details on artificial grass, go to our website at azfamily.com.
Okay, so basically this is a newscast in Arizona saying natural grass is going to be banned. And the council lady on there saying, well, this just makes sense because we're going to get rid of the grass so it's not functional or whatever. Whenever city council people, let me just go back to me here. Whenever city council, whoever's elected officials making these policies, they don't know much about everything. No one can know a lot about everything. And so the sign of an effective leader is someone who can fill those voids in their knowledge with specialists, and specialists using evidence to make these decisions. And when people are elected and city councilors are in the position of making policy, and you make a policy on, well, this just makes sense, or whatever springs to mind the easiest, that is the bias of availability heuristics, meaning you convince yourself that it's a good idea because it's what springs easily to mind. What's the easiest thing that comes to your mind? And therefore it must work. It must make sense. Oh, it makes sense to remove natural grass and put in plastic grass. Yeah, that makes sense. We have a water problem. Natural grass requires us to irrigate water, which is not always the case, but that's what they think. Well, so we should just remove it and put in plastic grass. That makes sense. So we'll just do it. That's an availability heuristic bias. Okay. And we're going to show in the next video exactly what's probably going to happen in Arizona, which is already happening in California. So now let's go to California, who also did this a while back. They banned natural grass because somebody got elected and thought it was a good idea. The first thing that came to their mind, well, that makes sense. We have to do something. Well, I have to do something. Let's just remove the natural grass. And I'm going to get back to this in a second as to the other options that include natural grass that they should have considered, but they didn't. So now let's go to the next video coming from California. So Arizona is banned natural grass, and they're putting in plastic grass. California already did that in a couple cities, not the whole state, but in some cities, they banned natural grass and they put in plastic grass. Now let's hear what they have to say out in California on the local news. Whoops, let me go back to the internet here. I'm not on here. Okay, here we go.
Risks associated with so-called forever chemicals in the turf, also called PFAS chemicals. Welcome to science class. The worry is that the chemicals can leak out during extreme heat. Those chemicals in high quantities have been known to cause various cancers, among other health issues. Now, Governor Newsom recently signed a law that would allow cities to ban artificial turf, but vetoed a bill that would outright ban the chemicals in fake lawns statewide. Yeah. Turf, of course, is used in big volumes in places like football fields. And some have pointed out, it seems like the state is more worried about the plastic turf than the concussions kids get from playing on it. But after all, turf doesn't have a whole multi-billion-dollar industry behind it.
That's true.
The Daily News spoke to an engineer at USC who said more testing still needs to be done to determine the risk, but worries about the plastics getting into the water supply. It's likely legislation will pick up the issue next year, but it's just like, man, we just can't get it right.
Yeah, well, the reason you can't get it right is because you're not referring to specialists. You're not getting specialists involved with the city councils, or they're not bringing in the right specialist, whoever it is, who is a specialist in turfgrass. There are many turfgrass species that can survive very well with virtually no input from irrigation. If I had it up, actually, I could go to my Twitter account and show you. There are grasses like Bahia grass. There's grasses like buffalo grass. Some of the newer varieties of Bermuda grass that require very little water, if at all. Okay, they can withstand a tremendous amount of drought conditions and for prolonged periods of time, and still be marginally acceptable or acceptable to the average person. So if you ever hear a councilman or an elected official or anybody on the news saying, well, or even scientists, whoever, or salesmen, whoever, well, I just can't think of a better reason. I can't think of any other reason. I can't think of a reason why we shouldn't do it. Well, that's an appeal to ignorance. Okay. And when they say, well, this makes sense. We have a water problem in California, a water problem in Arizona, and they all these lawns applying water. So removing them is what comes to mind the easiest. We should remove those and put in plastic. That's an availability heuristic bias. And in what happens in the case now we're seeing is that because they didn't consider the alternatives that included natural plants, meaning the more drought-tolerant plants, which many of them exist. Granted, you might not like buffalo grass. You might not like the look of Bahia grass. But Bermuda grass looks very, very, some of the newer cultivars of Bermuda grass do very, very well in California. There's one of the better water researchers is in California who studies exactly this issue. Instead of looking at alternatives to the existing turf that was in your landscape, that could very likely result in a minimally acceptable lawn and still have natural grass. They just said, oh, well, it makes sense just to rip it out and put in plastic. Now you've got a plastic lawn with a whole set of other problems. Okay. PFAS, these forever chemicals in the plastic grass or in the components that comprise plastic grasses. They come in there and now there's all these potential, I don't know a lot about plastic grasses, these potential carcinogens that exist in plastic grasses. And now they're banning plastic grasses. Meanwhile, if you just left it alone to begin with and called in, the University of California scientists, I'll leave their names out of it. I don't know why they want to get involved, but there's research going on all over the United States and a lot of breeding that goes on to address this exact issue. And we've come a long way, even in the last 5 years, certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, of being able to maintain an adequate, acceptable home lawn or even a sports field complex with very, very little water compared to what we had in the past. Okay. So keep that in mind when you hear someone say, well, that makes sense. I can't think of anything else. That's the first thing that popped into my head was just remove the grass and put in plastic. Well, this is an example of the potential disadvantage or potential consequences that can occur when you use when you're not using logic and your thought process is biased by the availability heuristic. It's absurd. Now we're having to go in and rip up all the plastic grass because you didn't bring in the specialists who knew something about it to begin with to help you out. So keep that in mind, guys. All right. Now on to today's article, which is a fun article. Okay. It's a normal article, rather robust, but there's a couple little things in there that I really like about it. So let's get to the article today. Today we're going to do the second paper from the team at Clemson. This paper is entitled Thatch and Mat Management in an Established Creeping Bentgrass Green. Now, the last article we did from this team, they did L93 bentgrass on a grow-in. This one is going to be, I think it's A1. A1 creeping bentgrass on, but it's been established. This is a 3 or 4 year old putting green that they're doing this work on. But they used the same sort of product that they used last time. And if you didn't listen to the previous podcast, don't worry about it. I'll go over it and explain it in this one as well. Okay, so we're coming down to the last 3 or 4 articles, I hope, on Thatch. Most of them are going to be from this same Clemson team for the remainder of this week. But this is the first one. I love this stuff because the result in here is just great. It's just fantastic. You need, this is another perfect example of when I say I wouldn't do anything unless you have a good reason. I wouldn't apply potassium, phosphorus, whatever the case is, biological thatch. I wouldn't do any of it unless you have a good reason, because there's a chance that 1, nothing's going to happen, but 2, the opposite could happen. We don't know. Just because you read a marketing sheet and it says it's going to do this, that doesn't mean squat to me. Okay, and this is a perfect example of that. You better have a good reason, because the opposite could occur. So let's get into it. Talking about thatch. Thatch is formed primarily from periodically sloughed roots, horizontal stems, stubble, and mature leaf sheaths and blades, while mat forms when thatch is slow to decompose following sand top dressing. So remember, the thatch is the part above the soil line and the green tissue, and then the mat is the part below the soil line where the thatch is starting to decompose, and it has soil and included in that little section there. Excessive thatch. No, what did I say? Oh, I did that. No, thatch accumulation occurs when turfgrass production of organic matter exceeds decomposition rate. Excessive thatch is commonly associated with negative physical and biological effects on the soil profile, such as reduced hydraulic conductivity, water movement through the soil, decreased water infiltration. Wait, they said reductions in hydraulic conductivity and then decreased water infiltration. These are the same thing. They're just different phrases. I'm not sure what that is about, but increased localized dry spots, reduced tolerance to cold temperatures, increased disease and insect problems, and reduced pesticide effectiveness. Now, we're going to talk about this reduced pesticide effectiveness when we get to the pesticide month. I think February is, I forget, January or February is pesticide awareness month, or there's a day in one of those months. I can't remember. And I'm going to talk about pesticides. And what happens a lot of times with pesticides is the thatch itself will greatly reduce the days that it's effective, because there's so much microbe activity in there. Apparently it starts breaking it down a lot faster than without the thatch. So the half-life essentially is reduced greatly when thatch is present, as opposed to when it's not. At least oftentimes that's the case. That's what we find. Excessive thatch is commonly, okay, I already did that. Okay, so mechanical practices such as verticutting, core cultivation, grooming, and top dressing are commonly used for managing thatch mat development in golf greens. Okay, we're familiar with that. We've been going over it for several weeks. Golf course superintendents and turfgrass researchers continually seek new regimes for combating excessive thatch production and are reconsidering some past thatch control methods to combine with new strategies such as chemical control agents, which minimize surface disruption. So again, we're going back to this whole idea of being able to control thatch without disrupting the surface. No one's really figured it out in any perfect way yet. So So here's the objectives of the study. This study investigated the effectiveness of combining various mechanical biological treatments with top dressing for managing thatch mat levels in established A1 creeping bentgrass golf green without adversely affecting turfgrass quality. Remember, we can go and tear the thatch up. That's not a problem. It's just being able to do that without affecting the ball roll or the quality of the turfgrass is the issue. The research hypothesis was that top dressing alone would not adequately manage thatch or mat levels and must be supplemented by one or more mechanical or biological treatments. Okay, so that's the that's the introduction. I'm sorry, okay, yeah. I'm just checking the chat. Okay, so Brady, it's good to see you. Lush, if I need to take a break, we can skip. Yeah, Lush, I almost skipped today, honestly. I was so busy and, but I still have some workers out here, but I think I can get this done in the next hour. So I appreciate that. And to be frank, there'll be a day here or there where I'm scheduled and I just have to cancel it. I mean, what are you going to do? Life happens. And there'll be a change after the new year, by the way. I'll change the schedule around a little bit after the Christmas holiday. Okay. Anyway, back to the study. Materials and methods. Studies to investigate various thatch mat reduction procedures on 3-year-old A1 creeping bentgrass golf green were conducted from 2001 to 2002 at Clemson. So we're on a 3-year-old A1 creeping bentgrass golf green in Clemson. Bentgrass plots were maintained to golf course standards by walk mowing daily with solid rollers and using preventative disease programs. So he's using normal mowing, normal rolling, normal fungicide programs to maintain it as best they can, like a golf course. Oh, I forgot to mention real quick is that the title of this is Thatch and Mat Management in an Established Creeping Bentgrass Golf Green. And it was published in Agronomy Journal in 2007 by Bert McCarty, Matt Gregg, and Joe Toler. So I usually mention that at the beginning, but I forgot to. Okay, so you're going to see the treatments are very similar to the previous study that we discussed 3 or 4 episodes ago. Treatment evaluations were an untreated control plus a 2x9 factorial of top dressing levels and mechanical biological methods. Top dressing was applied either twice monthly at 0.6 millimeters or once monthly at 1.2 millimeters from March through October using a calibrated drop spreader. So that depth was like 0.04 inches is 1.2 millimeters. Very, very light amount of top dressing. The mechanical biological thatch control methods were none, core cultivation, vertical mowing, grooming, a biological thatch control agent called Thatch X, and 3 combination treatments using 2 or 3 mechanical methods. And then they go through the various combinations. And the untreated plots received no top dressing or mechanical biological control. So let's go to, I don't have it queued up yet, but let me go to if I can get it up. Where did it go here? Okay, let's go to the Thatch X label. I know I went over this last time, but I want to make sure everybody's watching, or everybody who might be watching now has a chance to see what we're talking about here. If I can find it. I had it up last time. Okay. So again, I don't know if this is exactly the same exact product because the product on that they used was a, where is it? So it's down here. It was a 4, yeah, so it will be 4.9.4. So this product is going to be 4.9.4 on the oxide equivalent. So this is the product they used, at least it appears to be. Let me see if I can get it on the screen here. Okay. So this is the product, the Thatch X 422 Granular Turf Supplement by Emerald Isle Solutions. And it says Thatch X is a blend of food and feed grade organic meals, including cold water seaweed. And they have the instructions on here, and Soundless says apply Thatch X 1 or 2 times per year. And you can go through here, and they follow the instructions on the label in the study. So they applied the correct rate and the timing and everything to achieve whatever they're recommending in this label. But I mentioned last time, nowhere really on here does it actually make a claim that Thatch X is going to do anything. Okay, so to their credit, they're not claiming really much of anything on this thing. It says Thatch X will be effective at somewhat lower temperatures. Effective at what? We don't know. I mean, clearly Thatch X, you're implying that it's going to reduce thatch or have an effect on thatch, but apply only after danger of freezing. This product is intended as a supplement to a regular fertilization program. For best results, use it in conjunction with a slow-release nitrogen fertilizer program. So there's nothing really here. It just says use Thatch X with an integrated program to help manage conditions that promote thatch buildup. Anyway, the point is they're not really making much of anything on here. But I wanted to show this to show from a critical thinking perspective, is there any good reason for me to be convinced that this product will do anything to thatch other than nothing or increase it? And meaning, is there anything in here that the evidence has shown would help reduce thatch? And if you look at the label, there's nothing. There's kelp meal, there's fish meal, and alfalfa meal. And they can talk about whatever else was in there, proprietary, whatever. I couldn't care less about that. I can put nothing in a product and say it's proprietary information, or I can put whatever in there and say it's proprietary. I don't know what's in it, so I'm not convinced it will do anything. So if you're faced with a product like this or any other product that has a claim on it, or the title's Thatch X, it's called Thatch X, so I'm going to assume that that's their claim. Just look at it, and through the literature, the videos that we've been going over, the scientific literature that we've been discussing, there's really only one or two active ingredients that do anything to thatch. One of them is the lipase enzyme, and then we're going to show something in a day, probably tomorrow, where there might be something going on with some liquid type of sugars. Not very convincing to me, but there might be something going on there. Regardless, everything else, all the bugs in the jug, all these other things, they don't show any effect on thatch in terms of reduction. There's still no reduction of thatch at all. So there's no good reason to believe that this product would do anything. Okay. So take that for what it is. It's called Thatch X, but I'm not convinced. I don't see any good reason for anybody to be convinced that this would do anything to reduce thatch. Okay, so keep that in mind. That was one of the treatments that they used in the study because that's the way it's being sold. And this study was funded by I believe it was the South Carolina Golf Course Superintendents Association. I can go in when we get through to that point. I'll look. Actually, let me just look right now. I know where it is. Actually, it's at the end. Financial support was provided by the Carolinas Golf Course Association, and the GCSAA. So this was funded by golf. It wasn't funded by companies. This was funded by golf people. Okay, so there were probably some people using this product at the time, and they wanted to know, is there anything to it? Okay, looking at the label, I can tell you, I'm not convinced there's anything to it at all, and there's no good reason to. So, but you never know. So we're going to go and do some work on it and see what happens. Now, the establishing period, when they applied it to the establishing L93 putting green, nothing happened. There was no reduction or increase at all. So that was one piece of evidence for bentgrass putting green when it's during the process of establishing. Okay, now this is already on a mature turfgrass, 3 years old. Okay, that's the biological. So vertical mowing and grooming. So that's the biological. So vertical mowing and grooming. Two vertical mowing treatments. It's very similar to the previous study. Differing in depth and frequency were applied using a commercial vertical mower, 2 millimeter wide tempered steel tungsten tip, blah blah blah, 25 millimeters apart. So that's at 1 inch apart. One treatment consisted of vertical mowing into a depth of 6.4 millimeters, whatever that is in inches. Not much, like 1/10 of an inch or something, or less, or 1/5 of an inch, or 1.05, whatever it is. I don't know. Convert to inches. 6.4 millimeters. On the middle of March, May, September, and October each year. The second treatment consisted of vertical mowing to a depth of 19 millimeters on the 15th of March and October. So they just did it very not very deep, but more frequently, or deep and less frequently on the vertical mowing. Grooming, vertical slicing, 3 millimeter deep with blade spaces 6.4 millimeters apart were performed twice weekly with a commercial walk-behind mower and a grooming attachment. So that's how they did the vertical mowing and grooming. Core cultivation was performed with a core cultivator using a conventional hollow tine with tine depths of 76 millimeters, which is 3 inches, and 3-inch centers. So that was core cultivation. The cores were ejected and they were brushed back into the holes, is what they said, after they dried off. All right, the biological thatch product we just went over, a commercial product manufactured by Ocean Organics, which is what we just showed on the screen, was evaluated as a biological thatch control agent. According to the manufacturer, thatch control has a fertilizer analysis of 4.9.4. That's NPK. So in scientific literature, we have to do it on the elemental analysis, not the oxide, which is what you commonly see on fertilizer labels. But when you convert that, that's what it ends up being, 4.9.4. From specific feed-grade organics, cold water seed plants, fish meal, and alfalfa meal. It also contains, quote-unquote, selected microorganisms and other bioactive ingredients. I mentioned that the other day. If you want to, there's a couple red flags. Usually it's like biological soil management. Those are red flags of a BS or someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or it's just trying to convince you of something that's not true. And in this case, it says selected microorganisms and bioactive ingredients. Those are all just fluff words. Okay, there's not any substance to that in terms of being convinced that it would actually do something when you see bioactive ingredients. I'm not saying it isn't, but those are red flag sort of trigger words in my mind. I know when I hear someone say that, I usually listen up because I'm like, I wonder what other nonsense this person's going to spew out. See how deep of a hole they'll dig for themselves. So these bioactive ingredients were designed to accelerate thatch reduction. So I didn't see that on the label that I showed. But of course, it's called Thatch X, but they're claiming here that the manufacturer claims that it's designed to accelerate thatch reduction. Specific microorganisms levels and viability were unavailable due to manufacturer product content secrecy. You gotta love that. Well, we're not going to tell you what's in it, but what's in it, you should believe me, it makes an effect. It reduces it. Well, what's in it? I'm not going to tell you that. Well, then don't be convinced. Don't waste your money on it. You tell me what's in it. Okay, and then I'll take that to the literature and look it up and see if there's any evidence to support your claim. If you're not going to tell me what's in it, then don't be convinced. Save your money. It's really that simple. They show you something on a flyer, said this product, it contains this product and it reduces it by that percent. Don't believe that either. Just because it's on a marketing flyer, every marketing flyer I've ever been a part of, even when I was in the industry, it was a perfect example of cherry-picked data. I've never seen one that actually showed results from a refereed study in its entirety. I'm sure someone will print off 20 of them right now and send it to me on chat. Fine, fair enough, send it to me. But they are designed to do one thing, and that is to convince you to buy their product. It has nothing to do with truth. Okay? If the truth helps them, great. If it doesn't help them, they're not going to use it. What they're trying to do is convince you. So if they show you a marketing sheet and it says it contains this many microorganisms and it reduces this, well, I'll believe the microorganism part, whatever. It doesn't affect me. But if you're going to tell me it reduces something, reduces thatch, then I'm not going to believe that on a marketing sheet. I'll go look it up in the literature. Okay? And I hope on some level we start to begin to have that same sort of mindset. Now, there's another issue, finding literature and knowing how to go find the literature and finding, working your way through it, critically thinking your way through it. That's another skill, which hopefully we'll get to, and we'll or maybe this channel is helping with that. I don't know, but that's a whole nother issue. But, yeah. Anyway, don't believe it's on a marketing sheet. Don't be convinced so easily. Combination treatments. The 3 combination treatments were core cultivation, grooming, core cultivation, and verticutting, or the 3 core cultivation, grooming, and verticutting. The measurements, they measured thatch mat depth, percent organic matter, water infiltration, surface hardness, visual turf quality, and ball roll distance. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. This is the same thing they did in the last time. The thatch mat depth and organic matter, they measured the thatch mat depth using a ruler essentially, and they measured the organic matter in the mat through weight loss on ignition, where they burned it, and they measured the weight before and after. The surface hardness was measured using a Clegg impact hammer. If you're not familiar with that, a hammer is not a hammer at all. It's a tube with a metal, or not a metal, an inserted sort of steel. Think of it like a rifle and a bullet. And a bullet, you drop down the rifle tubing, and it falls down and hits the ground, and they measure the force that it hits the ground, and that through that they know the hardness of the material that when it hit the ground. That's basically the way it looks. Even kind of looks like a bullet, not a bullet, but you just drop it down through there and it measures the force. Very consistent, very, very, useful way of measuring the surface hardness. Infiltration rate, they measured that using a double ring infiltrometer, which is about the only practical, reliable way of measuring surface infiltration rate in the field. There's two complete rings, one a little bit larger than the other. One's inset inside the other, and you fill up one and you measure the water movement out of one. So it is what it is. I'm not a big fan of it, but I don't have a better solution. So I'd rather, in the field, I can take a core out. I prefer to take a core out of the field and measure it in the lab. That has a little bit more reliability in my mind. Okay, turfgrass quality was measured on 1 to 10, 1 being no live turfgrass, 10 being dark green dense. Ball roll was measured using a stimp meter. If you're not familiar with what a stimp meter is, I tried to do that last time. Maybe I can just find a picture of a stimp meter. Let me see if I can just pull one up. I have one in my basement, but yeah, here we go. Here's a stimp meter. For those people who might not be golf people, this is a stimp meter. So it's an aluminum, whatever, bar. That this ball, there's a little indentation right underneath this golf ball. And when you lift this end up slowly, the ball starts to move. You hold it still and the ball goes down there at the same inclination every time. And you measure the distance from the tip of the stimp meter to where the ball stops. And then you turn around and do it the opposite direction. And you take the average of the two, and that's in feet. So if it's measuring, 10 feet. If it's stimping at a 10, it's stimping at 10 feet. And if it stimps at 12, then the ball rolled further. It's useful for golf people and golfers. And for superintendents. I mean, they have an idea of the speed of the green. Okay, that's ball roll distance. Okay. All right, so that's the materials and methods, and that's how they performed everything. But now let's get to the fun part. I'm going to try to get through this without laughing. It's not easy for me when I read papers like this that are so fun, and the results are so just great. I love it. So the results talks about the interactions. Okay, so thatch mat depth and organic matter content. Okay, so we have all this cultivation going on. We have a biological treatment. We have verticutting and top dressing and all these things. Doing it for 2 years in South Carolina. A lot of work, a lot of people involved, I'm sure. And the results are none of the mechanical biological methods reduced thatch mat depth compared to non-treated. Table 3. So nothing they did reduced it. And oftentimes that can happen when you start from square one, when you start from the initial level. But when you measure it from like the control, so the control went up, and you're going to measure it from where it is today rather than where it started from. So you can say that the rate of increase declined, but everything increased. But this one says none of the mechanical biological methods reduced thatch mat. Now look what it says in red. Thatch mat depth increased 12% with biological thatch control agent and 15% with top dressing. So top dressing, you're going to increase the depth. Use something, you think it'd break it down, but you're diluting it and you're adding something to the soil. But thatch mat depth increased using the product that's marketed as decreasing thatch mat. This is a perfect example of what I mean when I say I wouldn't do anything unless I have a good reason. Like I said at the beginning, don't do it unless you have a good reason, because there's just probably an equal chance that the opposite's going to happen. You're buying. Can you imagine all the people that have bought a product like that, thinking that it's going to reduce their thatch, and the whole time it's increasing their thatch if you're on A1 Bentgrass in Clemson, South Carolina. And you'll find superintendents today that will swear that it's reducing it. And not only is there evidence to not support reducing it, there's evidence to support that it's actually increasing the thatch, that they think it's actually reducing. I don't know what the definition of false marketing is or false advertising is, but good night. I mean, if you're claiming that it's going to reduce thatch, by the way, there's no evidence that it reduces thatch. But instead, it's actually showing evidence that it's increasing thatch. You'd think that would be a class action suit or something, because you got all these people. I don't know how many people are using this product or similar products that are using these products thinking that's reducing thatch when in fact it's doing the opposite. We had the same thing a week or two ago, or episode or two ago, where we're talking about potassium and we're applying potassium because we think it's a stress element, when in fact the potassium increases dollar spot sometimes on Bermuda grass, increases microdochium patch on some bluegrasses. It can increase anthracnose on poa greens, and you think you're applying potassium because you're reducing to reduce the stress, when in reality it's increasing the risk of disease in many situations. So again, I'm not just saying I wouldn't do anything unless I have a good reason, just because I'm trying to be contrary. I'm saying that because the literature shows numerous situations where people are performing certain practices or using certain products because they think it's doing something, when in fact it does nothing, or it does the opposite. So in the case of it doing the opposite, you're not only wasting your money, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. You're actually causing more of a problem. It's the exact same thing as the king, the mice, and the cheese. I got a thatch problem over here. You have anything you can help me with? Yeah, I got this Thatch X product. It'll help you. So you put it on. You're like, well, hey, my thatch keeps going up. You got anything else you can help me with? And it just keeps going up and up because you're not using sound logic and you know, the evidence to make your decision. You're basing it off of whatever the person comes in the door tells you. So anyway, it increased by 12%. That's genius. And the reason I like this is because they took the time to publish this work. They were going to publish it anyway. This is a lot of work. I think this is part of Matt's master's degree. They're probably going to publish it anyway. But oftentimes we find this stuff in private industry research where we'll do studies a lot. I'll say I used to do studies a lot for companies. And they don't really fund it in a way that can be published a whole lot. They only fund like 1 year, or they just want to goof around and do some stuff here and there, and it's not really a robust study to get it published. But the results are not favorable to the company sometimes. Well, I can't publish it because there's not enough there to publish. So you either have to figure out some way to get the funding to run it again, to publish it, or somehow. And oftentimes, my point is, oftentimes work gets done that doesn't get published, and it was not favorable to some product or whatever, but it never gets published. And in this case, the result says it increased. It did the complete opposite of what it claims to do, and they did get it published, and it's in a refereed paper. And how are you gonna refute that? I mean, how are you gonna argue that this didn't happen if you're a company that makes a product like this, or you're the salesman selling it, and you walk in the door, try to sell it, and say, well, this product, this refereed paper says it increases it. Oh, well, it's this and that. And I said, well, I haven't seen that. I don't care what you hadn't seen. What this paper says is, under the controlled study that these guys, high quality researchers, Bert McCarty, Matt Gregg, and Joe Toler, high quality researchers conducted and published this stuff, and it says it actually does the opposite of what you're claiming. How are you going to refute that? That's what I like about stuff like this. Genius. Surface hardness. Surface hardness for top dressing alone, vertical mowing, grooming, and the biological treatment was similar to the untreated. So nothing happened with any of those. Sometimes you want to be harder, sometimes you don't. Most of the time, superintendents at high-end courses prefer to be firmer. Water infiltration. Compared with the untreated, the only mechanical biological treatment that did not improve water infiltration rates were top dressing, grooming, and the biological treatment. So if we go down here to this table 3, for those listening, the Thatch mat, table 3 is entitled Thatch mat. Let me see if I can get on Thatch mat depth. Surface hardness and water infiltration rates for thatch management treatments used in established established A1 creeping bentgrass. So we have the water infiltration. If I can get my little thing on here, the water infiltration over here on the far right, and the untreated I've highlighted in yellow. If all you did was top dress, you didn't have an influence. So it went from 61 centimeters per hour to 73, and that was not significant. If you grew them twice weekly, it was at 72 centimeters per hour. That was not significant as well. And then biological control agent did nothing as well. And I hear this a lot too from other products, like what they call them, like not like dethatch products. Well, there are dethatch products. This is a dethatch product, but they're also like what's it called, like liquid aeration products or whatever. I can't remember what they call them. But they'll have like bugs in a jug, and they somehow think that it'll oxidize or eat the organic material and increase water infiltration. Meanwhile, they're applying the product that includes a wetting agent in the product. Of course, you're going to change the water infiltration, probably increase water infiltration when you have a wetting agent in the product. Of course, that's going to happen. But the actual cause of the water infiltration problem is not addressed by your bugs in a jug eating the organic matter. That's silly. And here's an example of that. Water infiltration was not affected at all by these biological thatch control agent. Thatch mat depth, you can see, was not influenced at all. It was 32 when it started and 36 when it ended, and that was not no, wait, thatch mat depth did. Oh, this is where it was. This is where it increased. It went from 32 to 36. 12% increase. Oh, Lord. Can you imagine? It's just critical that we learn to think critically. I know that sounds, what is that, a double positive, whatever you call it? We've got to start thinking critically, guys. There's so much money that gets fleeced out of our industry because companies are taking advantage of your ignorance, basically. I'm ignorant on all that. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm ignorant on virtually everything except one little slice of the world in turf management. And I get taken advantage of too. Like I've said before, I buy vitamins, even though I know the literature says it doesn't do anything for American diet. But they're taking advantage of you guys. And it's just critically important that we learn to think critically and find our way through this world of nonsense when it comes to turf products and services. Some of them are incredibly valuable and some of them are completely useless, but all of them cost money. How are you going to find the truth in this ocean of nonsense? All right, turf quality, infiltration. Okay, turf quality. So I'm going to skip through here to towards the end here. Basically, the turf quality rating results are presented separately. Okay, The turf quality was very, very high for every treatment. So I'm not even going to bother going through it. So they had them broken out by year because there was an interaction, I guess. But all these are 9s and 10s. There might be an 8, 8.9. So looking at a table here, March, April, May, June, July, all the way through October. All the treatments are on the left, and all of them are extremely high. There are some differences in June and July, and towards the latter part, August and September. There's some differences among treatments, but whenever you have all the treatments basically a 9 or greater, okay, so one, I don't think I've ever, the untreated was a 10 in June and July. I mean, doing nothing, the untreated was a 10. Here's March through October. Here's the untreated: 10, 10, 9.8, 10, 10. 9.5, 9.3, 9.7. So doing nothing, the turf was about as perfect as you could possibly expect it to be. Okay, by doing nothing. So the only thing that could happen is a reduction in turf quality, which is what happened whenever you do a lot of core cultivation and verticutting and grooming. You can actually see a reduction in quality. But it still was very, very acceptable. 8.9, I think, was the lowest it ever got. And the next year is the same thing. Very, very high quality numbers. 7.2 was the lowest. I don't know. Here's a 6.4. There was one here that's marginal, but most of them are very, very high. 9s, 10s. There's some 8s and 7s, but there was a few differences in treatments. I guess what I'm saying, among treatments there were clearly some differences. In September, the untreated was fairly low relative to some of the other ones, but all of them were acceptable. Okay. The turfgrass was never not acceptable. They were all very, very high, very good. Okay. Which is good. I mean, in this study, we're not looking necessarily at turf quality per se. We're just making sure that the turf quality making sure whatever management practice or product we put on the turf to account to manage thatch did not have a negative effect on turf quality. That's the point of this. We have to balance both out. Like I've said before, I can rip out all the thatch in a matter of a couple of hours, but the turf would be just obliterated. And that's so we can't really consider stuff like that as a viable option. Ball roll distance. So how did it affect ball roll? They used LSD on this one. So the ball roll was reduced by core cultivation on the 4 times annually compared to top dressing alone. Okay, so top dressing alone resulted in X number of feet, and when you core cultivated or they vertical mode, there was a reduction on the 7 days, and there was a reduction on the core cultivation at 14 days, and no differences after that. Okay, so let's go down here to the, they kind of go over, they discuss all this stuff, all the vertical mowing and core cultivation, and I encourage you to go download this if you want to learn more about it. I'm going to go to the biological thatch control and the conclusions, just because I love it. I just love researchers who publish their research, regardless of whether it's seen as positive or negative. Just publish it and get it out. Okay, because that's whenever nothing happens, oftentimes we'll get faced in the world of publishing, we'll get faced with a rejection from either the editor or reviewers or whatever, and say, well, nothing happened in this study, so it's not novel, it's not publishable. But in reality, sometimes nothing happening is a result that if we're expecting something to happen and nothing happens, then that is a valuable result. Okay. So keep that in mind, is that, when we can get it in the literature when nothing happened, and in this case, and the opposite happened, it's really important. It's great. Let's read through the whole section here. There's 2 paragraphs. Limited research has been reported on using biological products, in quotes, for thatch mat reduction. Thatch decomposition without physical disrupting the surface of turfgrass would be tremendously valuable. Most biological products contain an array of sucrose, glucose, or other sugar sources, low nutrient sources, various acids, and inoculated microorganisms. Now, remember when we had Dr. Sidhu on here, he was talking about the microorganisms that generate lacase, and different microorganisms can produce lacase with different redox potentials. So we need a very, very high redox potential in order to break down lignin, which is a major component of thatch, and usually the rate limiting factor of carbon in the thatch as well. To break it down, we need to break down the lignin, and to break down the lignin, we need an enzyme with a very high redox potential like lacase. So when he says various inoculated microorganisms, it doesn't matter that you inflated the microorganism population. We're going to apply these sugars, which is what he says, various sucrose, glucose, and other sugars. That soluble carbon will very likely have at least a temporary inflation of the microbial activity or microorganism population. That will probably happen. But it's completely irrelevant if it doesn't inflate the correct species of microorganism for a prolonged period of time. And that's what Dr. Sidhu was saying. We have to not just inflate the microorganisms. We have to look at 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, a specific microorganism, and we have to maintain that population at an elevated level, which is very, very hard to do. In this case, we're looking at white rot fungi, those types of microorganisms that break down lignin, that in turn help break down thatch. You can go out there with anything. You can probably go out there with pure cane sugar, soluble carbon, and throw it out there and inflate the microorganism population. I know I did it in South Florida with wood chips. If you get the right organic material that has enough soluble carbon in it, or will break down quickly, you can inflate the microorganism population quite high. But all that's useless if it's not the right microorganism. And what he's saying is that all this has happened, sucrose and glucose, and we're inflating the microorganism population. All this has been conducted in the past with very little effect at all. According to the manufacturer, thatch consists of a specific feed-grade organics, cold water seed plants, fish meal, and alfalfa meal. This is all just natural organic fertilizers. Following manufacturer recommended rates, timings, and frequency during 2-year study. I'm not going to be able to say this without laughing. Oh, God. I should ask Bert or Matt to come on here and talk, because they would keep me from laughing. Okay, hang on. Okay. Thatch X did not control thatch mat accumulation, as thatch mat thickness was 12% greater than the untreated. The only thing that gets me stopped laughing is if I can think about all the customers, you know, who bought it and were taken advantage of. You know, that's sad. It really is. That breaks my heart. It's very depressing. You know, there's so many people who probably even today are using that product or products similar to that product, who have bugs in a jug and proprietary microorganisms and all these other things, who think that what they're doing is actually resulting in their claim. And they may be convinced to the point you can't change their mind. I put it out every week and I see it happen, and I put it out every month, and before I put it down, you should have seen how bad this place was. I don't doubt that they're convinced that that's what's happening. What I'm saying is in the scientific literature, it's very clear that those products either don't do anything at all to the thatch layer compared to non-treated, or compared to the top dressing alone, or they increase the thatch. Turfgrass quality with Thatch X was comparable to top dressing alone, vertical mowing, and grooming. And organic matter content of the thatch mat layer was maintained at pre-study levels. Table 4. Inconsistency of biological thatch control products has been noted. Ledbetter and Scoglie. We keep coming back to this paper every time, it seems like. We've gone over that paper. If you want to know more about the Ledbetter and Scoglie paper, go back on the live stream, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you'll have my review of that paper. They evaluated 3 biological treatments that included lime, a 2377 fertilizer, sucrose, and glucose, and concluded that they provided no decrease in thatch, even as far back as 1967. Murdoch and Barr, 1976, we also covered that paper, found no evidence of thatch reduction for commercial microorganism inoculum in common Bermuda grass. Burnt, we had Lee on the podcast. He noted that thatch thickness reduction of Kentucky bluegrass after 1 year of applying 3 commercial bioorganic materials, but was unclear whether it attributed to the added microorganism or increased infertility. In other words, these bioorganic materials was a hodgepodge of numerous things in it, and he didn't pull out individual things to know what it was. He just knew that the product did something, but he didn't know what it was in the product that did it. Okay? So that's the biological. Okay, conclusions. Short conclusion paragraph. We'll get to it here. Under the conditions encountered in the study, sand top dressing alone maintained acceptable turfgrass quality, but did not adequately control thatch mat development or improve water infiltration rate. So this is really important if you're a superintendent and all you're doing is top dressing on A1 Bentgrass in Carolina. The addition of Thatch X, a biological thatch control product, did not improve results. So there's another study that they did. For some reason, it's popped in my head. There's another study that the McCarty team did when they were looking at colorants and dyes, pigments. And I'm going to get to that at some point. But basically, it said these aren't really doing what you think they're doing. I'm going to get to that paper too. The McCarty team has put out a lot of papers. They're well known for putting out high quality practical studies in golf, primarily golf, regardless of the result. And not that other researchers don't do that. I mean, we all do it. We all put out whatever the finding is what the finding is. But they put it out, and they're not afraid to say stuff like that. It's great. It's fantastic. The addition of Thatch X, a biological control, did not improve results. It actually made them worse. Compared with the untreated, the inclusion of grooming or vertical mowing with top dressing controlled thatch mat development. Okay. While vertical mowing marginally increased water infiltration, core cultivation was necessary to achieve substantial improvements in water infiltration rates, but the addition of grooming and or vertical mowing did not enhance this benefit provided by core cultivation alone. The combination of treatment of core cultivation, grooming, and verticoating was the only treatment that reduced organic matter content of the thatch mat layer during the 2-year study. The benefits provided by the mechanical treatment were achieved without causing detrimental effects of turfgrass quality. So what he's saying is basically the core cultivation, grooming, and verticutting was what was necessary to really see a difference, or have an effect on the organic matter. And that's what they found in the other study too when they were doing the establishing bentgrass, is that when you go in and do thatch work and you want to make a difference, if you're going to make a difference on thatch, it's number one, don't try to solve a thatch mat problem unless it exists. Okay. You're going to go in and try to cure someone's bad turf or bad lawn by removing the thatch. Well, if thatch isn't causing the problem, then going in and trying to tear it out isn't going to solve it. Okay, so one, there has to be a thatch issue that's resulting in whatever unacceptable turf you're observing. But if you're convinced that indeed it is the thatch that's causing these bad symptoms, I've said before, don't play games with thatch. Don't think you're going to rent some little, thatch machine from Lowe's that comes in there and just tickles the grass and you're going to have any meaningful impact on the thatch. You got to go in there and tear it up. You can't be afraid of it. As long as it's a spreading type grass. I mean, if it's tall fescue, or maybe fine fescues, or certainly Bahia grass or something like that doesn't really spread, you got to be real careful with that. You have to reseed it. But if it's a spreading type grass, tear it up. If the thatch is the problem, go in there and mean business when you get in there, whether it's verticutting or a combination of verticutting and aerification, get in there and really pull out that material. Again, if that's indeed what's causing the problem, go in there and pull it out, and don't play games with it. And that's the way to do it, especially on home lawns. But even on sport turf or golf, go in there and do some real work, and you will you'll be happier than if you just come in there and start fiddle-faddling around, trying to tickle the grass a little bit. Okay. So tomorrow, I hope it'll be a normal time, 10 a.m. I hope. And we're not going to have any guests this week. So 10 a.m. tomorrow, and then 10 a.m. on Thursday, and on Wednesday night, we'll have a 9 p.m. I really hope this is the last week on Thatch. Okay. Unfortunately, and I'm not making this up, I can put my screen put my folder on the screen. I have 22 now, 23 articles, 23, and this is minus this one, 22 on Thatch. So I don't know who mentioned this a while back. I appreciate you mentioning it, okay? But this is what happens when you go, hey, Travis, can you cover Thatch? And let me know. This is what happens. I end up going into it for a month or whatever, a month and a half, and I have no clue if this is of any interest to you at all. I mean, I think if we can sum things up on the cool season fall fertility, I think, by going over it regularly, week after week after week after week, we catch people who might not have caught a prior episode. We start talking about the same thing over and over, and it kind of starts to sink in, is what I'm thinking. I don't know. But I think people started to get the idea we need to go out a little earlier with soluble in. We need to refrain from these slow release in sources, especially later on in the season. I think that's sort of what we pulled away from the fall fertility. And on Thatch, because I didn't just do one day, I'm doing whatever it is, a month. What I'm doing is I'm trying to justify why I'm spending a month on it in my own mind. I think if I'm spending that much time on it, I'm hoping that people who didn't catch one day but caught the other day, they're starting to kind of gain some confidence in what's really going on. And that is, lignin is the number one problem. We got to figure out a way to break down lignin. Generally, it's not very easily done. Products from white rot fungi generally will help that. But if you're not going to do biological, which I wouldn't really recommend, honestly, biological, even though lactase tends to be what has shown to work, these other bugs in a jug don't work. These other dethatcher products, there's no evidence to indicate that they will work. So I'm thinking we're starting to kind of learn that and have some confidence in that. And we're also, I hope, starting to realize you got to do some damage. You got to go in there and really tear it up. But don't do that unless thatch is the problem. So I'm hoping that maybe that's what's going on in y'all's minds. I hope that maybe you're catching that from the show. I don't know, but I have a tendency to do this. Well, I'll just go over this for a week, and then it ends up being a month because there's so many papers on this topic. So So anyway, let's see. So let me go to the chat real quick. The Lawn Saw says, always never trust marketing. Always never trust marketing. Okay. Yeah, I don't have much confidence in marketing at all. Other than I have a lot of confidence knowing that there's a pretty good chance that what is in there is flawed. They've cherry picked something out, or they've done something that I'm very skeptical, very cynical of marketing, because I was involved with the teams that would put that stuff together, and just shook my head when I'd see it go out. Eric Sand says, I know I've learned a lot with regards to okay, good, Eric, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I have to understand, I'm sitting here on one end of the camera, and I don't know if you guys are in your trucks or out in your patios, or you're picking up your kids or whatever you're doing, and I don't know what's useful and not useful to you all. I try my best. Randy from Bulgaria, welcome back. What will be the next subject that we cover? So, good question. The next subject I'll cover after this week will be iron. I'm going to cover iron from now until the end of the year, and then I'm going to come back in January, and I'm probably going to start covering potassium, because here's my thought process, Randy, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you guys can steer me away from that if you want, if there's another area. But what I'm thinking is, it's wintertime in the United States where people are starting to slow things down, and I think there might be thinking about, how am I going to blend my next batch of fertilizer, my next blend that I'm going to have to order and have it come in February or March and get ready for the next rounds in April and May. You might be thinking about the components of those fertilizers now. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm thinking that, and so I want to get the iron and the potassium, two of the components of granular fertilizers that are generally unnecessary. I want to get those two in before it's too late, so you guys can make decisions on your fertilizer blends before it's too late for next year's order, is what I'm thinking. But if you all say, hey, I'm open, I'm wide open as another topic that you want to go over. But that's what I'm thinking. Iron for the remainder of this year, and then we'll jump into potassium in January. So thanks for that question, Randy, or comment on Randy. Lush says, I'm stubborn. I'm a stubborn mule that needs it beaten into my brain. Okay. You're out reading meters. Yeah, thanks for that photo I saw the other day. I was wondering what that was. It kind of looked, because my meter out here got changed, and because it wasn't reading, and I was like, what are you guys doing? I'm just kind of curious. They go, we're putting a meter on so we don't have to manually read it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. And then Randy finishes up, everything I've been covering is valuable for us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. I'm still amazed anybody even watches this stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know that, and it was useful. Like, I looked it up the other day, where if I've already learned something, I assume everybody else knows it, and that's known as the curse of knowledge. It's a bias known as the curse of knowledge bias, where when you learn something, it just becomes, oh, well, everybody understands that, iron's going to oxidize out at a certain redox potential in the soil. Everybody understands that. Well, no, not everybody understands that. And so I'm guilty of the curse of knowledge bias, where I just sort of pass over it thinking that it's common knowledge. When whatever you're doing, you're an expert on what it is you're doing, and I might not know about that. So I have to understand that, other people are good at other things, but they might not be good at this particular thing, being iron or being potassium or Thatch or whatever. So I apologize. I just sort of skip over stuff. Anyway, guys, thanks for your patience today. Sorry I got on late. I got to hit the road now, but I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Appreciate everybody for showing up. Thanks all. See you. Bye.